From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster.
All right, welcome back. My name is John. This is the Dewey Pod Monster podcast. This is a weekly podcast and it is about consumption. We are proud members of the You Run Podcast Network. You can find all of our previous episodes and all of our upcoming episodes, as well as all the other great shows on the You Run Podcast Network at yourunpodcast.com. If you didn't know, we are also sponsored by Jimmy John's, Freaky Fast, Sub So Fast You'll Freak. Maybe not. I don't know. Sean's with me this week. How are you doing today, Sean?
Looking at you confused as to what? What are we sponsored by?
I'm stealing your last
old draft
therapy bit. Yeah. I was going to go with Arby's, but I'm pretty sure you already had the meats on.
Yeah, we had the meats. Yeah, so. I definitely had the meats. If it wasn't so close to Christmas, I would hit the sounder for Andy Williams. It's the most wonderful time of the year. Because guess what, John? It's fucking Crummy Movie March.
What we've all been waiting for.
I know, it's something I've been waiting for all year. So this is the third year, believe it or not, of Crummy Movie March. The first year, year one, we did Never Too Young to Die, Black Devil Doll from Hell, The Perfect Weapon, and Hard Ticket to Hawaii. Year two, last year.
It's still standby. Never Too Young to Die is one of the best films that we've watched for this entire show.
It's pretty good. I hope this one that we talk about rivals it, but we'll see. We've got some good ones coming up this month. I got the whole thing planned out. I'm not telling you what they are. But okay, so anyways, year two, Phantom of the Mall, Eric's Revenge. That's one movie. Uninvited. Fat Guy Goes Nutsoid, which has the best artwork we've ever seen for this show. And our favorite, The Nostril Picker. So it's going to be a really hard lineup to match this year, I think.
I still don't think we'll be able to top The Nostril Picker.
I mean, that was a great find. I got to give you all the credit in the world because you found that one.
I still am shocked that I was able to find a hard copy of that from a family member of the cast.
Local,
yeah.
And a hat that we haven't seen you wear yet.
We will not see me wear it. So
why not? It's not in great condition.
It's kind of crusty.
Well,
kind of crusty.
Appropriate.
Well, Sean, before we really start in Crummy Movie March, I have to ask, what have you been watching this week? I know the answer to one thing. I don't know if you're going to bring it up, though.
I don't know if I'm going to bring it up either, but I'm sure if you bring it up, I'll chime in a little bit on it. So I watched this week. I had been kind of looking forward to watching this movie, and I kept kind of pushing it off, but I finally watched Y2K, which is a movie directed by Kyle Mooney, and it takes place basically in Y2K, 1999, New Year's Eve, 1999.
I didn't know Kyle Mooney directed it. I thought it was just another A24 project.
It is an A24 project, but yeah, it's Kyle Mooney's initial, I think it's his first feature film directorial debut. Put all those words together. I really liked it. I thought it was really well done and really funny. It has a lot of like throwbacks to 99 pop culture. And there's a few like surprise kind of people that show up in the movie. Like if you plan on watching the movie and this is the first you've heard of it, it's like a millennial as in turn of the millennium horror movie. It's a horror movie, but don't look at the cast. But I'll tell you, Tim Heidecker is the dad and Alicia Silverstone is the mom. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And they're not in it a whole bunch, but yeah, it's got a lot of, let me look up the cast real quick while I'm stammering here.
Does Alicia Silverstone, aside from that movie, is she like a working actress still, or is she just kind of, I feel like, I know she was in this because I heard a little bit about it, but I feel like the only time I really hear about her is when the occasional podcast covers Clueless or like the occasional like
Fear.
90s. I don't even remember that, but yeah, sure. Just like the 90s, nostalgia trip that, I love the 90s volume 703 or something like that. We'll have the
she just kind of pops up, or maybe some Aerosmith. Crazy.
Yeah, something like that. But I can't think of outside of this Y2K movie, I can't think of the last thing I heard of her even being in as an actress.
Yeah, so. True. It was kind of a surprise to me that she was in it, but the top cast is Jaden Martell, who plays Eli. He wasn't in Stranger Things, but he looks like one of those Stranger Things kids. And then Rachel Ziegler's in it. Julian Dennison plays basically Eli's friend. And there's a few other like young actors. So a lot of younger actors. One guy that's in it, Eduardo Franco, he's in Stranger Things last season. So And then next up, I watched, this was the crown jewel, possibly, of what I watched, Body Slam. So John kind of clued me into this, but I don't think he's seen it yet. This is from 1986. We're kind of like doing some research on this like wrestler mania, May kind of movie thing, tossing it back and forth. I think we've probably talked about it like about 500 times and haven't followed through with it. But this came up. And
it's the threat
title
that keeps on giving.
It's the threat that keeps on threatening.
Yeah.
The title sequence has Dirk Benedict, Tanya Roberts, Rowdy Piper, Captain Lou Albano, Charles Nelson Riley, Billy Barty, and John Aston as like the top names that show up. And I was like, oh man, this cannot be bad. So Captain Lou Albano, I could be wrong too. Captain Lou Albano's name in the movie, what is it? Captain Lou Barano is the character's name. So they can still call him Captain Lou and he's not confused.
This is like when they called him Alucard in Castlevania.
Oh, Dracula? Backwards?
Yeah, basically.
And then Rowdy Piper's name is Quick Rick. Geez, I can't talk. Quick Rick Brown, I think. Whatever. So the movie kind of, and the old lady that raps Rapper's Delight in Wedding Singer, she's in this movie very briefly. I recognized her from this 1986 film.
Peterman's mother in Seinfeld.
Oh, yeah, you're right. So basically, Dirk Benedict is this 2-bit agent / con man for a music group. And he gets wrapped up with some wrestlers. He hears Rowdy Piper's trying to get this negotiation with, I don't know, the wrestling promoter or whatever. And he overhears this and he wants to try and negotiate. So this becomes like, he's this great negotiator and he turns around and he gets wrapped up in wrestling managing. And it's funny because they play it off as if it's a real thing that you're not like adjacent to wrestling already to be a manager. It's like, no, the manager is like their agent. Anyways, they do these schemes essentially to create like this rock and wrestling before WWF or Hulk Hogan's rock and wrestling cartoon. I think they're probably pretty parallel. I didn't look to see when that came out, but this is like, they literally call it rock and wrestling. And they have this idea to have this concert essentially with this musician, this music group that Dirk Benedict is a agent for. They're going to play rock music like before these wrestling shows. And they have Captain Lou Barano's wrestling dudes are basically the barbarians from, or they're the Road Warriors, but it's Barbarian and some other guy. It's not Hawk and Barbarian. It's Barbarian and some other dude. And lots of corny jokes. Lots of homophobic slurs. I really cannot talk today. Lots of homophobic slurs and some Asian stereotype, like, I don't know, weird, possibly offensive things going on in the movie. 1986.
I still like when you were watching this, I get a message from Sean in the middle of the day. Kind of upset that you told me to watch this movie. Kind of okay with how horrible it is. Disregard all the slurs and watch at your own risk.
Yeah. And I think the scene I sent you is Charles Nelson Riley is interviewing them on like a promo and his mouth is mouthing all the words that the actors are saying. It's like, dude, could you maybe not do that? The last thing I'll mention really briefly is it's a documentary. It's called Blood and Flesh, The Real and Ghastly Death of Al Adamson. And it's about the B-movie director, Al Adamson. A lot of it really kind of covers his career, like, all the B movies that he made and all the movies that they made that they would rename other movies and how he would bring in these old actors who were it kind of fits into today's movie with one of the actors, but he would bring these old actors in who were kind of at the end of their career. They couldn't get hired for anything, but Al Adamson would hire them to be in these movies and they would give them a new lease on their career. Like John Carradine, I think, was one of his kind of regulars that he would hire all the time. And he made some of these Western B movies and I don't even know if they were considered B movies at the time, but they were kind of like these made for TV scripts that he would make these movies for, real shoestring budget. He occasionally would have some big hit that would make a bunch of money, or he would take a script that was a riff on some popular thing at the time. So I think one of them was like, he made a bunch of these stewardess movies where they were kind of like softcore, almost softcore porn, like maybe more like a Cinemax movie these days.
Cinemax?
Yeah. Those like basically TNA kind of features. and he would just release them multiple times under different names to match the new hype of the day. Or they would film these extra scenes that they would then cut into the movie because the movie wouldn't make sense after a while. Or he'd buy footage from some Filipino movie and it was black and white. So that was from 20 years before. He'd get this other kind of stock footage stuff that he would get and color it a different black and white like color, but just with a gradient or a grade over it. And it would be, it's SpectraVision. And they would film these little things to say why the scenes were in different colors. Just all this kind of crazy exploitation cinema kind of stuff. And it was a really good watch. I shouldn't laugh. He was subsequently murdered, and they kind of cover his how he was murdered and how they found his body. It was a real weird, it felt like they had this whole documentary in the can, and it was talking about his career and his life and all this stuff. And then he happened to be murdered while they were like considering making this documentary, like, let's just make it about his murder too. So that whole thing was really interesting. If you can find it, it's a Severin release. And that was pretty good. I found that really entertaining. But that's all I got. Those are my top 3 things.
So if you're curious, Alicia Silverstone has 85 credits as an actress, 80 that have been released and 5 upcoming. I don't know how much this counts. Like, just scrolling through it quickly, one of this is like Clueless Super Bowl commercial, like, I guess. But
yeah,
but my point is she is working, so good for her, I suppose.
Good for her.
Yeah. We also skipped over her strongest performance in Batman and Robin. Opposite
of course.
Arnold. As we really need to talk about that movie sometime, because that is like a masterpiece of dumb shit.
She's Batgirl, right?
Yes. I think she had bat nipples too. I know Clooney did.
Oh, really?
I'm pretty sure
Clooney
she had
did
nipples too.
I have nipples. Greg, can you milk me?
Did I talk about the Tom Green documentary last week?
I feel like you did.
All right, we'll skip that then.
I don't know for sure.
So we'll skip Tom Green because I probably already talked about it. I watched the ultimate monster truck murder movie or whatever called Rolling Vengeance. So,
did you?
Yes, this has come up a couple times, like off mic, but Rolling Vengeance is basically a rape revenge movie where a guy kills an entire town using a homemade monster truck as a weapon. And it's about as stupid as you would think, but it is moderately entertaining for what it is. If you like seeing Ohio hillbillies ran over by a truck and get squished to death repeatedly while doing dumb hillbilly shit, you'll be moderately amused. So, did you get a chance to watch it? I know I was sending it.
No, I haven't, but I have heard it's the definitive monster truck movie.
Well, are there a lot of monster truck movies? I don't even know that it counts as a monster truck. Like, it's technically a semi-truck that's been like retrofitted as a murder machine.
Is it even lifted?
Kinda. It's got monster truck tires on it for sure. Which I'm not sure where
it's
this
a
guy
semi
gets
with monster truck tires
and a drill.
Wow. Okay. It's not even like a donk. It's a true monster truck.
No, I mean, I'm pretty sure it would be considered a true monster truck in the sense that this is just a monstrosity of
a truck.
Yeah, it's a truck that has, I mean, it's got 2, I guess they're exhaust pipes that shoot flames. It's got like some, fancy ass like ground effects and like headlights and whatnot. It's got a very penetrative drill that doesn't quite get used the way you think it's going to. And it apparently does not have the ability to get a flat tire or to like be stopped, I suppose. I don't know. It's questionable on multiple levels. It's definitely not something that would be street legal, but he drives it all over this podunk Ohio town and, fucks up some hillbillies. So that's not the worst thing that I've ever watched.
Yeah, it's still Ohio, could be worse.
Let's put it this way. When the murder weapon in the movie is a giant truck, that's something I don't see every day, so I was okay with it. It's also one of those movies where the characters that are depicted on the cover of the movie, it's a drawing, so I don't know who they were trying to draw, but it's definitely not the 2 lead actors that are driving the murder truck and being saved from said hillbillies, I guess. Like, the guy who is the lead character that I think the poster is supposed to be depicting is blonde, but he's definitely a, brunette, like Hasselhoff looking type guy on this cover. I'm like, I don't know who the fuck this is supposed to be, but it's not the lead of this movie.
He does look very reminiscent of a Michael Knight.
Yeah, I can see that too. It's just that late, I can't remember if that's 80s or 90s right now. I don't have that in front of me, but it's that like mid 80s, like curly, like white guy, like bro / greaser look. That's like, I'm tough, but not that tough, type thing. And that's not what it is in the movie. But yeah, I don't even know if I said the name of it. It's called Rolling Vengeance. It's available somewhere. You should probably not watch it. Or you can, whatever. The other thing that I was referring to that I think you watched, apparently I don't have the ability to ignore an O.J. Simpson documentary, even though it's... So there's a new one that's out on Netflix. I think it's called like O.J. Running Away from the Cops or something like that. I don't know. Manhunt continues or whatever.
American Manhunt.
Is that what it is? Okay. If you have
American
Netflix,
Manhunt, O.J. Simpson.
If you have Netflix, it's probably coming up as a, hey, you should probably watch this in your first like couple clicks down as you doom scroll through there. So I know we both lived through OJ in real time as far as like this part of his story. I don't know if that's why every time they put a new one of these out and tell me essentially the same information, why I keep rewatching it, because I remember trying to watch the Rangers game during the chase and they put it in the lower corner because apparently a guy driving 40 on the freeway was more important than the Rangers playing hockey. Debatable.
You know who I am, goddammit.
Yeah, I did like Kramer spoofing that scene. That's always good. I sat through the whole thing in one sitting. I think it's like 4 episodes, 3 or 4 episodes, something like that. And I still don't really feel like they're giving me that much more in this documentary than I got in the ESPN one, the 30 for 30, which was pretty good, and also like 4 episodes.
That was a good one.
And even the reenactment they did on FX with, was it Cuba Gooding Jr. playing OJ, I believe?
Yeah.
I mean, that one's dramatized, so grain of salt, sure, but I thought they covered, like, if you went into that movie without knowing anything about the OJ Simpson trial and case, I thought they covered it about as good as you could expect. The only thing I really got from this one that I found to be really interesting and what kind of kept me watching it, aside from not wanting to get up and find something else to watch, so laziness, the dude who worked with Johnny Cochran, I don't know his name, but the other lawyer with him,
I think Carl Douglas, I think
so. He's by far the most interesting guy. I don't even want to call him a character, even though he kind of is a character. He's by far the most interesting person that gives his side of the story through this whole documentary. Like, I've heard Mark Furman a bunch of times, sounds like he at least admits that he's a piece of shit and, move on. What else can we say at this point? I've heard a bunch from Marshall Clark. I've heard a lot of Charles Durden. Is that it? Chris Durden?
Chris, yeah.
Chris Durden.
Now you're throwing me
Whatever.
off. Yes. Christopher Darden.
Durden, whatever. I've heard him a bunch of times talk about the case, separately. The only 2 people that I hadn't heard a lot of was the one OJ lawyer and OJ's agent through the whole thing, which was kind of interesting to hear his side of it too. So it's cool that you get to see those 2 perspectives. I don't know if that justifies another 4 or 5 hours of reliving that trial again.
I thought that I watched it too. Yeah, because we talked about it, but you knew that. But I thought that the first episode, they talked about a lot of stuff that I don't want to say I followed the case closely, but
sure. How could
a
you
radio
not?
show that, a radio show that we listened to covered it very extensively, and they would talk about it, and they still do. They're still on the air. Well, they're not on the air. They're a podcast now, but they still talk about the case very often. They talk about OJ a lot. And I didn't know about the knife that the witness at the airport said he saw, or the thing that he thought was a knife that OJ threw away at the airport. Some of the timeline stuff, like I didn't understand how Kato Kalin was involved. Like I knew that he was a house guest or he lived in a bungalow behind OJ's house, but I didn't really understand logistically how that worked. I didn't know that OJ's older daughter from his previous marriage lived in the one next door to Kato. And this had interviews with some of the police officers, several of the police officers, Kato Kalin, like you said, Carl Douglas, who, I don't know.
It's like Johnny Cochran light, kind of.
Well, he was a lawyer at Cochran's law firm, but they basically talk about,
if you want to compare him to someone now, it'd be Cochran light.
Yeah, maybe. He's just very, I don't know. He's very charismatic. Like he's very
Yeah.
easy to watch, but some of the things he was saying, I was like, dude, I don't understand. I guess I don't understand. I'll get into it. They don't use in the trial. They had eyewitnesses. Like I didn't know about the thing where OJ almost hit the woman when he was driving away, and she wasn't called to testify because she gave her case on like tabloid news because they weren't going to call her, and she figured, hey, I might as well make a couple bucks off of this. And they wouldn't use her in the trial. There were several witnesses or several pieces of evidence. There were like ways that the defense basically turned the trial into more of like a race issue. Up. Yeah. That and more of like a race thing than it ever really needed to be. And I understand why. And then, I don't know, there was just a lot of stuff that I didn't necessarily know. So I found it entertaining at that point, or, from that perspective. It was, if you think you know a lot of stuff about OJ, I think it was worth a watch, but I also don't know how anybody, I guess what I was going to say about Carl Douglas and his whole thing is like, how could you look at the evidence in the case, like the things, even though that they couldn't, they couldn't use it or they didn't use it in court and they disputed it to high heaven like the defense did. How could you look at the stuff that was evidence and not think that he was guilty? Like, how could you still at this point think like, OJ wrote a book called I Did It. And then they had to switch it and they sold all the rights so that the Goldman family would make the money, would earn or get the money from the book. And they called it If I Did It, just so they could like switch it up. It's like, or was it vice versa? He wrote a book called If I Did It and they changed the title to I Did It.
I think the book's still called If I Did It, but I get where you're coming from. And I'm to play devil's advocate, because I agree with you. I think his perspective is that of a criminal defense attorney, which is not necessarily, I'm here to prove that you didn't do something. I'm here to prove that you shouldn't be going to jail. Is
introduce reasonable doubt.
Yeah. And quite obviously, he's pretty good at that, at least on this particular case. And, to just kind of go back on some of the stuff he said as far as that you didn't know about. I had heard about the knife thing before. I didn't realize how much like really damning evidence they just never brought to trial, like the stuff in his house. And there's like a whole, I think it's in the first episode, there's like a whole like 3-minute PowerPoint presentation of all these like really damning things they're like never brought to court, never brought to evidence, never all this stuff.
You guessed it.
Yeah.
This wasn't introduced either.
Yeah. A lot of stuff like that. And I mean, that trial is so weird looking back at it because it's right on the cusp of DNA and what is and isn't admissible. And I remember when that trial was going on, a lot of people were like, DNA is bullshit and whatever. Like they didn't believe it for reasons, I guess. So maybe that's got something to do with it. Just, it's like you always hear about like serial killers from the 70s and how they could just go on forever, just like doing their thing. Maybe that's a big part of how he got off, is because just police procedure wasn't there. But the more you look at it, the more it's like, he didn't get off because the police department fucked up for quite a few times for quite a few years and it finally bit him in the ass. But yeah, that was pretty much all. I mean, I watched a couple other things this week, but that's all I got that I'm willing to put out there at the moment. Yeah, Rolling Vengeance and OJ to go together. Got anything else you want to add, or you want to take a break and come back and talk about a crummy movie?
John, maybe we should take a break and come back and talk about a crummy movie.
Let's do that. We'll be back in just a moment. We're going to talk about a movie that I will probably fuck up the name of several times throughout the course of this episode. We'll be right back. Hi everyone, AI John here. Have you ever watched a movie that you loved and wished you could get a fresh perspective from someone who's never seen that movie before? That's just what's in store for you on the Reaction Shot podcast. Dave takes a deep dive with his guests to chat, dissect, and review these movies, and even discuss the impact the movie had on pop culture. Head over to yourunpodcast.com to check them out and all the other members of the You Run Podcast Network. We're back, and it, as mentioned or threatened or promised, it is Crummy Movie March, and we're kicking off this year's run of crummy movies with the movie Midnight Ride. It came out in 1990 or maybe 1995, depending on which website you want to look at, and we're going to start with a third-party review from Avada, And Avada gives this movie 3.5 stars out of 5 on Rotten Tomatoes. And Avada says, Hamill hams it up as a psycho on the loose. Dudikoff is as good as the cop trying to save his girlfriend. I don't quite know if he watched the same movie I did. But 3.5 out of 5 Rotten Tomatoes. Sean, what is Midnight Ride about?
To find that out, we go to IMDb and we look up the words Midnight Ride. It takes us to a site that says Midnight Ride released. I'm going to go by this date because it looks like a 1990 movie. It says it was released in 1990 and it gets 5.1 out of 10 stars with 1.2 thousand ratings. And we go to the storyline or the plot, the one on the top. It says, a housewife just left her cop husband. When she picks up Justin Mckay, she'll wish she never did as she's plunged into a nightmare and the grip of a psychotic killer. If we scroll on down to the storyline.
Before you get into the story. Well, actually,
yeah,
we'll edit it around. I'm sorry.
Will we?
Go ahead. No, I don't know.
We go down to the storyline. This one, the storyline comes care of Michael Rudoy, MDRC at HP9000A1.AUM.MX. Frequent contributor. Thank you, Michael. He says, a series of mysterious murders have happened in Montevideo, a small city in California. A policeman's wife is running away from her husband, trying to divorce him. The policeman tries to reconcile and begins to follow her. ... This is, that's horrible. I mean, that's like what the first 5 minutes of the movie are about, but at least we find out about Justin Mckay. There we go.
So we'll get into cast in a second, but as far as the rest of these schlubs, Mark Hamill's in this movie and he plays Justin Mckay. And I just now, in the last 60 seconds, realized that his name is Justin Mckay. At any point in this movie, did you think of him as anything other than Mark Hamill?
No, but he does say his name is Justin Mckay.
Does he? Okay.
He introduces himself a couple times. But yeah, I mean, I could only see him as Mark Hamill.
Yeah.
For sure.
So who else is in this movie?
Well, I want to point out this is directed by Bob Bralver. And Bob Bralver is mostly known for doing stunts. He's like a stuntman. But he did direct a few things before this. Amongst those, all TV. But he directed some episodes of Hardcastle and McCormick, if you remember that good one. Knight Rider, The A-Team, Riptide, and some other stuff. Father Dowling Mysteries. How could you forget that? So the cast here, there's 3 main actors that I'm going to mention because these are probably the only 3 that anybody recognizes at all. We have Michael Dudikoff, who we know from American Ninja, the American Ninja series, I guess we'll just say that. And he's been in a lot of other Canon Group pictures, which this one is a Canon Group picture. We have Mark Hamill, of course, Star Wars, The Guyver, your favorite, other movies.
Joker.
And then, sure. And then we also have Robert Mitchum. Robert Mitchum, for some reason, is in this movie, and we'll get to it. Yeah. But Robert Mitchum, if you don't know who he is, he's like an old school, like 60s, 50s actor. The 4 things, if you look on his IMDb, the 4 things it says he's quote unquote known for, 2 of them are from the 50s, one's from the 60s, and one's from the 40s. So he's like, it kind of ties back to that Al Adamson thing where this wasn't Robert Mitchum's last movie, but I think he didn't star. He was in like maybe 5 other movies after this. So that's kind of odd. And when he does appear in this movie, he's at the very end, and most of his scenes look like they're filmed where he's just filmed separately and they spliced it together. There's a few scenes where they're like walking together, but other than that, it seems like he was probably filmed like days after or something, and they just kind of filled in his spots.
You know what this movie needs is some credibility. Get Robert Mitchum on the phone.
Hell yeah. He needs a paycheck.
Yeah.
He needs his 500th car.
Yeah. Sounds right. I don't even know where to start with this. Sean, is this your first watch on this, or is this one that you decided to go?
Oh, absolutely not.
I wouldn't expect it. So how did you find this gem?
So I found this, I want to say the first time I brought it up on the show was last May. And I know I watched it on like Plex.tv, just their free movie thing. You know, they have the free movies that you can watch just like Roku or Tubi or whatever. And I watched it on there. And I watched it and I thought, this is so ridiculous. We're going to have to come back and watch this. And I watched a few other movies. I don't think any of the other ones are going to be included in Crummy Movie March. But this one was like top of mind when I was like, what are we going to watch for Crummy Movie March? We have to come back to Midnight Ride.
Don't you love when you stumble on something so ridiculous that you're like, we're going to have to revisit. I'm going to have to subject someone that hasn't seen this to watch it. So
Oh, absolutely. I live for that.
it's kind of the basis of this show to an extent. So yeah, if you haven't guessed, this is my first time watching this. Hopefully my last time watching this. Yeah, it's not that bad. But I mean, to kind of cliff note on this, since our plot and storyline's not great, like I actually don't think this is that complex of a movie. This is basically Michael Dudikoff has a cast for some reason. His wife is leaving him for reasons we don't never. I didn't even know that she was just a housewife. I just figured, like, there's really no backstory to them other than they're maybe separating or fighting or whatever. For some reason, in the wake of her, trying to leave her cop husband, who is also following her, she decides to pick up a hitchhiker who happens to be Mark Hamill. And basically, I think they're trying to imply that he's a serial killer, but if he's a serial killer, he's got to be the worst fucking serial killer in the history of serial killers, because he just goes on this like insane spree of, I guess, kills, or this murder spree over the course of like an hour and a half of movie time, in which he never is able to lose the one-legged man that's chasing him with random cars, even though he's sidelined for presumably large chunks of time as Mark Hamill continues to go presumably the opposite direction of Michael Dudikoff. And throughout the movie, I just kind of felt like this is just him workshopping his Joker laugh for when he was going to get that cartoon in the future, because he kind of slips in and out of it. There's a lot of scenes where, I'm going to put it out there now, quite frankly, I don't think Mark Hamill's a good actor. Shoot me. Like, I think he's a pretty good voice actor when he does just voice work, but as an actor in film where he has to actually do stuff other than use his voice, I think he chews scenery at best, and I think at worst he just sucks. And this is kind of somewhere in between those for the majority of this movie.
Yeah, I want to preface or give some context. So at the beginning of the movie starts, and Michael Dudikoff's wife is basically, he's sitting on the couch like, whatever. He's just like munching on a sandwich like he's never eaten it before. And he's just going to town on this sandwich, and his wife is packing a bag. And it comes out that essentially Michael Dudikoff can't choose between, he's having a hard time determining if work is more important or his wife is more important. And she's fed up. So she decides to leave, like you said, picks up a hitchhiker. The movie starts off after the whole Dudikoff eating the sandwich. Mark Hamill's trying to rent a car, and he doesn't have a credit card, so they won't let him. He's like, well, I don't have a credit card. I'm trying to get to Halverston or some fucking place. And so essentially, if he could have been rented that car, the whole movie could have been avoided. But the whole movie takes place in about, I think it's about like a 6-hour stretch. So this whole thing it's this cat and mouse game where neither of the two characters that the male characters, at least the male leads,
neither are particularly competent.
Neither of them are good. They're not good guys. You don't want to root for either of them. Like, Michael Dudikoff seems like the biggest douchebag asshole. He has a cast on his leg, like you said, for some reason. And there's a scene really early in the movie where he takes his cop buddy's cop car. He's like, hey, they're outside of a Burger King, and he's parked outside of like the drive-through, like the little sign, the little lit up sign.
He steals a cop car.
He steals that cop car. He's like, hey, I don't have any money. I don't have my wallet. My wife just dropped me off. You want to spot me for a burger? And the guy's like, yeah, let's go get one. They start walking in. He just gets in the car and drives away. Like, what the fuck? This is a cop. This is his car. Yeah. He's going to get fired because you stole his cop car that you smash into your wife's car. So after he crashes that car, he's on the side of the road with a rock, like breaking the cast off. He's got 2 weeks to go on his cast. I don't know why I know this, but I do. And he's breaking it off, and then he limps along the rest of the movie. But it's this constant cat and mouse game.
Moved just as good in the boot as he did in the Jordans that he stole from his other friend later. So.
Yeah, and the taxi cab that he stole from another guy, his other friend. But yeah, neither of these characters, neither of these male leads are likable at all. Dudikoff's an asshole, and Hamill is just, like you said, I don't think he basically seems like the Joker character in the Batman the Animated Series that he plays, personified as a character. And like you said, I felt like it was a real like workshop role for him to, I'm going to develop this really crazy, gravelly, raspy voice and this insane laugh that I'm going to use for much better purposes later on down the road. But let's see what I can do with this thing that I'm doing.
Yes, on all those. The other thing with Dudikoff in this, you're right. He does seem kind of like a shitty husband, maybe worse, because he doesn't realize that Mark Hamill is this psychopath until well later in the movie, like probably halfway through the movie. Like it's really apparent to Michael Dudikoff that he's chasing this guy who's a killer, psycho, whatever he is. But okay, so I guess halfway through the movie, you could say, okay, maybe he has some kind of noble intention because he now realizes he's trying to save his wife. But prior to that, he's just this fucking crazy cop that's chasing his wife without...
Yeah, stalking her.
Yeah, but the funnier thing about it with Dudikoff in this is, they give Mark Hamill a lot to do in this movie. Like, Mark Hamill's really the lead of this movie. He's probably the guy who's responsible for, I'd say, 95% of the things that you're going to remember about this movie. He's probably got 70% of the screen time, maybe 65%. Most of the time when Dudikoff's on screen, he's either hobbling around or just looking like a confused ass.
Yelling at people.
Yeah. But not like in a fun way. He's not yelling like old Al Pacino, I'm old, so I have to be loud. He's not one of those types of loud. He's just being a general prick. Yeah.
There's a scene where he goes, this is before he knows Hamill's like a killer. So he's trying to get to his wife and he goes into this like diner to ask, anybody seen a brown Oldsmobile? And there are just random locals, like truck drivers and locals and whatever, sitting in this diner. And this one guy stands up and he's like, he says, Dudikoff says something like, I'm looking for a brown Oldsmobile. I'm looking for my wife. She's a blonde, tall. And one of the guys is like, count me in, me too, or something. And another young guy stands up and makes some cracks wise or whatever. And Dudikoff is like, I'm a cop. I'm looking for my wife. I'm pissed and I'm ready to kill anybody. And it's like, dude, you're asking these people for help. Why are you such an asshole? Why don't you calm the fuck down, bro?
Plus, like, if you're looking for your wife, do you really want to start declaring, like, I'm going to kill anybody? Like,
right. I'm ready to kill anybody.
Right. Like, oh, your wife's right there. Kill her. So,
yeah.
I don't know.
If you're going to kill anybody, kill me. Oh, wait.
So this movie does have its moments of entertainment, though. It has some really ridiculous car stunts and a lot of car explosions these are like, all these cars must have been Pintos just with bodies of different Oldsmobiles on them, because every time you like sneeze on a car in this movie, it explodes like chaotically. And I really like that. Okay. I also think the car that he steals off a Big Rig is funny because one, who the hell, like, I'm assuming the Big Rig that he steals his car off of is going to like a dealership of some sort, because he says
he's taking the cars to a set. A Hollywood set.
Okay. I didn't hear that. I just heard he had to get 5 cars somewhere or they're going to kick his ass or whatever.
Right.
So that makes a little more sense. But he steals a Cutlass Supreme convertible with a small block engine cut out.
Yeah, like a big blower on the top.
So one of my first cars was a Cutlass Supreme, and it did not have any of this. It was a boat, basically. Like, I feel like I could have drove that thing into a brick wall and the wall would have more damage than the car. But the idea of him, like, driving this supercharged fucking Cuddy, I was like, the fuck kind of lowrider did you just rip off that has this car sitting on a truck?
Yours didn't have flames that came out of the exhaust when you drifted around corners like Dudikoff here?
It had flames that came out of the engine at one point, but not out of the exhaust. So,
but not in a cool way.
Not in a way that was good at all.
Explode way.
It probably should have exploded, but it just burned for like a very short time and then put out, because they tend to make cars so they hopefully don't explode.
This movie has like this, I don't know, they hide these little like comedic things in, or I guess I'll tell you and you tell me if you think it's comedic, or maybe the listeners can determine. There is a scene when Lara first meets Justin, and there's a police checkpoint. And they get to the police checkpoint and they're like, you look familiar to the wife, to Lara, the wife. And she's like, oh no, this is my brother. We're going to Santa Barbara to meet, or we're going home. We were visiting friends, blah, 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 blah. And they drive away and the two cops sit there for like 5 seconds looking at each other, 5 seconds of the movie. And then the one says, wouldn't mind being her bucket seat for the ride to Santa Barbara. Like, what? That's so gross. What the fuck are you talking about? There's just these things where they hold on scenes or scenes are just too long. And it's just hilarious how poorly
it's also funny because immediately after that, here comes Dudikoff with the best like tailing skills in the game because he's like hobbling in a stolen police car where he's managed to catch up to these people who have been running from him and had at least a half-hour head start. So he catches up to him and gets to the same checkpoint. And he's like, did you see my wife? They're like, oh yeah, she just went that way with some dude. You know?
Oh yeah, I thought that was her.
Yeah, like, no problem. And then he just blows right the fuck through this checkpoint. And I mean, I would buy that, like, a cop just lets another cop go after his wife, thinking that I would totally buy that. But the way they play it off, it's just like, again, Dudikoff being an asshole. Like, I got to get my wife off into the night, you know? I really would have enjoyed if it just, because I really question if Mark Hamill and Lara are just going in circles, because again, the amount of like head time they have over Dudikoff, where he catches up to him like 4 or 5 times in this movie. That's got to be the most unbelievable part of this whole fucking movie. That they could just go driving for like a half hour to an hour ahead of him, and he just hijacks a car off a fucking thing, and a couple minutes he's right back on their tail.
He had a AirTag on his wife or something, because he just,
I guess,
instantly knows exactly where she's going to be, where they're going, where they're heading. There's a scene later where Dudikoff and Hamill meet. I think this is the first time they actually meet in the taxi. Dudikoff picks up Hamill on the side of the road, and they're driving, and somehow the tables get turned. He realizes that this is the guy that's been with Lara, and he tells Dudikoff, Hamill tells Dudikoff that Lara's dead. And he's like, oh, no, whatever. And he pulls a gun on him. Hamill pulls, this is going to be confusing, but Hamill pulls a gun on Dudikoff and eventually ties him to the hood of this taxi cab, this like old, like big taxi cab that it's
pretty entertaining.
Dudikoff stole. It's so great. He's ramming the tail end of this tanker truck. Yeah, and Dudikoff's like, no. And when they show him, his head is kind of like hanging off the front of the car, but as soon as he bumps the trailer, the tanker, his head is like retracted, so his head actually can't get hit. And Hamill is having so much fun ramming this thing and trying to smush Dudikoff's head, but the car runs out of gas. So he pulls over and he puts the car in neutral, and he's like, and he pushes the car down a hill. Dudikoff escapes.
Car still blows up for reasons.
Yeah, the car hits a bump. Coincidentally hits a station wagon that's just driving down the road below, and the people scream, the thing blows up. And Hamill's thing in this movie as Justin Mckay is he takes a Polaroid picture of his victim before he kills him, essentially, or even after he kills him. And he takes a picture of the explosion, and a cop instantly pulls up. He's like, hey, buddy, do you know what happened? No, I don't, but I got this picture. And he shows him the picture. It's like, come on. This is too good.
My favorite thing of that whole sequence, and it's one of those things that would be easy to miss, when he's ramming the back of the semi-truck. So Dudikoff is tied down. He's got his left and his right foot are on the mirrors on the front of the car on either side. And then his hands are tied. The first time I watched, I'm like, how the fuck is he tied down? And then you realize that the bumper has got some breathing room between the car, and it's not like a car now where the bumper's like literally attached. As they go and push him into an explosion or whatever they're doing, he manages to get his first thing free. So we've already seen him knock the mirror off. So he should be able to use his legs, which theoretically are stronger than his arms, and just rip the fucking mirrors off. Like, not that bad. He rips his arm off the bumper. So he takes one of the ties from the bumper and he rips that off. So he's removing a chunk of the bumper to free his hand and then free his other hand and his feet. I was like, so how the fuck did they manage to get his hand loose? Because I think you would have a lot harder time ripping the ropes off a tied down bumper than off an already broken mirror.
I don't know. I just know he pulls his feet and the mirrors both snap off pretty much at the same time, and he rolls off. But somehow Hamill doesn't see that he came off, and he assumes that he's dead.
The other thing that really annoyed me in this movie is Laura is a fucking moron. There's so many opportunities where Mark Hamill, okay, so I just looked it up for the point of this argument because there is a scene where him and Dudikoff are standing next to each other and Dudikoff like towers over him. He looks like he's a solid foot taller than Mark Hamill. I'm like, how tall is Mark Hamill? He's 5'9", so he's about average height for a guy. But he's skinny in this movie. He looks like Luke Skywalker basically in this movie, but if Luke Skywalker was a fucking psycho dickhead. There's a point in this movie where Laura is in the back of this bus with, crazy Mark Hamill, and he's threatening her or whatever, and she manages to get a fucking dirty, hairy, hand cannon, and she's ready to pull the trigger. She does pull the trigger a couple times, and it just clicks, and he's like, ha ha ha, you can, does his little evil guy laugh. Why isn't she just pistol whip the shit out of him right there? Honestly, he's not that big. All he's got is his switchblade at this point. Pistol whip that fucker and don't stop until his face is cracked open. Right?
I love that scene on the bus because he's got the microphone. He has his own podcast going on. He's got the arm and everything.
That's funny too. But if you're in a life and death situation at that point, don't you just crack the guy in the face and you don't stop until you've subdued the person who's trying to kill you, quite literally, multiple times?
Yeah, usually.
So I think she's dumb. And we haven't even got to the hospital ATV, four-wheeler scene.
Oh. Yeah, that was great too. I love that part.
Boiler room or whatever.
I love that. I didn't know in hospitals that they have special doors that if you open and just walk in, you fall to the basement. There's no warning or.
I mean, it just looks like a regular hospital door. Not?
Yeah, we're going to put you in the hospital. Oh, wait, you're already here. And that scene, they're in the basement and Mark Hamill's riding around on this ATV, this four-wheeler, with a pipe, and he's like, it reminded me of Black Rain when that guy with the motorcycle comes and cuts the guy's head off. And it's a basement. You would be able to hear an ATV, but somehow Dudikoff the fall must have made him deaf because he just can't hear anymore. So he didn't even know that there was this whole ATV scene. But yeah, I mean, there's just so many things about this movie that I'm just over the moon about. I love basically how Hamill just overacts to the end of the earth, and you can tell Dudikoff's acting is why he only mainly made American Ninja movies. His acting isn't great, and Hamill's overreacting, so you get a little bit of a balance between the two.
Dudikoff doesn't really have a lot to do in this movie, though. Aside from occasionally being a jerk, and he might as well just spend the whole movie saying, "Where's my wife?" He doesn't, you never get to see, busted leg aside, you would think he would have at least one scene where he, kicks the hell out of Mark Hamill. It never happens. He does shoot him eventually, but it's kind of like if you had Jean-Claude Van Damme in a movie and never had him do the splits. It just wouldn't, it leaves you wanting.
There was a bit of a fight scene at the end when they're in their dark. It's the whole battle falling into the basement, but that fight when they're in the dark room, which isn't the best if you're trying to show a fight scene and it's almost a pitch black room except for little slivers of light. It's generally not the best place to feature a fight, but he does a little bit of the action-y thing. But I mean, like I said, he's there to basically be the asshole crazy husband that chases his wife. But you're right, he doesn't really have much to do besides that really one-dimensional thing that he does.
Is there anything on this movie that you did not like that we haven't already kind of danced around? I feel like this movie is a really good mix of there's a lot that I don't like about this movie. There's a lot that I'm okay with in this movie, and they almost all happen simultaneously.
Yeah, I think the things other than what we talked about, the two main things, the biggest grievance that I have is that Michael Dudikoff is a cop, but he doesn't know how to do a pit maneuver. He cannot do a pit on any of these cars that he's chasing. There's a whole scene where he act
waffly, so
he breaks so many laws. He's weaving back and forth next to this Mustang cop car that Mark Hamill's driving with a shotgun, and that he keeps shooting out of whichever window Dudikoff's at. But if he would just do a pit maneuver, he could have stalled it out.
By the way,
yes. The other thing, and I know that you didn't mention it for this, but I watched a different copy. I watched a different streaming services copy than you did, and I know that you had some problems with it. But even the one that I watched, the audio is so bad. The music will go over. I could still tell that they were talking, but sometimes I had to put on a subtitle just to see the whole I wouldn't mind being her car seat or bucket seat or whatever. I had to turn the subtitle on because I knew that he said something, but I was like, what did he actually say there? And had to do the subtitle to even see what he said. So the audio is all over the place. Sometimes it's much louder than the dialogue. Sometimes it's where it should be. It's crazy. It's not very well mixed.
For the people who would like to know, the audio track that I watched had full on like minutes of audio just not there. And I didn't really think it took that much away from the movie.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of just can watch what's going on screen and you know what's going on.
I get the gist of this. And to be fair, I didn't bring it up because I didn't think it was the biggest detractor of the movie.
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah. In fact, you asked me about it, and I was like, it's Crummy Movie March. I thought this was just par for the course.
That's just how movies are this month.
Yeah, sometimes. I don't really have a whole lot to add to it. I kind of feel like I said, everything is kind of crammed all in one thing with it. So unless you want to add something to it, what time is it?
Then you're in for a big treat, bro, because it's hot dog time.
Now, I'm going to bet lead off on this one because this is Sean's month of picks and terror and torture for me anyway. Not yet. Midnight Ride's just kind of, it's there. It's a movie. It's okay. It feels very much so like the kind of movie you would see on at like 2 a.m. on like, you know, the CW or something like that back in 1990 something. It's not a movie I feel like necessarily excels at anything, but it's also not unwatchable. I think the biggest thing about this movie that's kind of gonna be a detractor is I could see it being pretty forgettable. Like I have a feeling once I get past this week's episode, I don't know that I'll really think about Midnight Ride again very often. Maybe when I see Mark Hamill on something, maybe I'll stop talking about the Guyver for a minute and start talking about Midnight Ride, but it's okay. I give it about a half a hot dog. It's worth giving a try if you can watch it for free. I wouldn't pay anything to watch it. I would definitely say avoid that. But if you like Mark Hamill and you don't want to see him be Luke Skywalker, if you like Michael Dudikoff and don't want to see him do karate, this is the movie for you.
Whose hot dog is this? Huh? Yours?
I'm going to counter what you just said and say that I will never forget this movie because I've watched, this is my third or fourth time watching it now. I got to say, Crummy Movie March was made for this type of movie. It is so ridiculous, so over the top, so outlandish, whatever words you can think of to describe something as bonkers or wackadoo or shithouse crazy. It's all of those things. From the start, when Dudikoff is sitting on the couch eating a sandwich, oblivious that his wife is leaving him, to stealing the car off a car hauling trailer, to Bus Drive from Hell. This movie is one that you have to see if you're a fan of fine filth, such as me and you. If you're listening to the show, I think you have to see the overacting and the spectacle that is Midnight Ride. I give it all the hot dogs. Every hot dog I can give it, at least one full hot dog with chili on top. All of it. I think that you should click the link in the show notes and watch this movie as soon as possible. That's my endorsement.
All right, so we do a question of the week sometimes. This week we have a question of the week, and our question this week, to hear from you, the audience that presumably loves Mark Hamill, I want to know, aside from Star Wars or the Batman franchise, what are your favorite Mark Hamill films or characters? So we're going to start on Blue Sky, and let's see, at CaptainMerity.com. You can do a .com on here, apparently. I didn't know that. Change our handles to @crap.town.
Maybe.
Anyway, he says Cockknocker from Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back. I feel like that movie was the movie that kind of reintroduced Mark Hamill as a live actor, which is ridiculous because it's a movie about a guy who punches people in the dick and has a vibrator lightsaber. And he's only in it for, 2 minutes? Yeah. But it's a little fun cameo. I'll give it that. And then our friend Boomer over at Podcast in the Woods, also a member of the Run Podcast Network, says he was fantastic as the Pim Reaper in Fall of the House of Usher. Have you watched that? Because this comes up more than once.
Is it the Mike Flanagan version? Because that's what I would think, but I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that. Okay. I didn't see that.
So over on Instagram, our friends over at Dissect That Film say his role in Fall of the House of Usher was pretty great. And then also on Instagram, we have Pete Foster Photography, and he says, as Cockknocker. So we have two options. We have Cockknocker, and we have Fall of the House of Usher. Sean, do you have anything you want to add as far as favorite Mark Hamill films that are not Star Wars or The Joker?
Midnight Ride, Justin Mckay.
Okay. That's your only answer?
Yeah, that's my real answer.
That's your real... Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
So,
Fuck yeah.
I don't really know. Like I said, I really don't like Mark Hamill that much. I think he's kind of I think he's... Honestly, I think he's a lot like a Bruce Campbell or a lot like a Kevin Smith, that he just kind of found a way to have a career being Mark Hamill, and more power to him for that. If I were going to pick something, if I had to pick something that he's in outside of this, I'm going to say The Guyver, just because no one said it. So, sure.
I'm surprised Boomer didn't say it.
He thought about it. I asked him about that. That was his response. He thought about it. I do think that his best role that he's done has been as a Joker. I do think his voice work for that is... Honestly, I never thought you could like pull off the Joker so well just as a voice actor, and he kills it. So I'll give him credit for that, but we said not those. And just kind of looking through his filmography right now, I don't really give a shit about most of this stuff. So
yeah, I didn't even look at his filmography.
Well, you didn't need to. You love this movie.
Yeah. I mean, what's not to like?
It looks like he realizes he's not that good of a real actor, because the majority of these are voice performances. Or I'm going to get people pissed off because I keep talking shit about Luke Skywalker, aren't I?
Maybe.
Well, that's all right.
I think people are maybe exhausted with Star Wars, so maybe you're not that far outside of the norm, but I don't know.
I think people are in general, at least I would assume they are, but I think he's part of the 3 movies that kind of supersede that. I think they're just exhausted with new Star Wars.
Maybe.
But I don't know. I've kind of given up on that I gave up on that when Luke Skywalker, of all people, showed up on Mandalorian. I haven't watched anything Star Wars since then.
Yeah,
he showed up.
Same boat.
He showed up. I was like, I'm out. Enough of these whiny ass Skywalkers. Anyway, we have places you can follow us. You can find us. If you want to tell me I'm an asshole for all my Luke Skywalker hate, you can do that. We're at Dewey Pod Monster on all the social media networks that we care about. Feel free to tell me I'm an asshole there, or back me up and say Mark Hamill's really not that good of an actor, but Midnight Ride is a hell of a movie. You can find all of our episodes at our site, which is crap.town. You can also go to Rockin' Tomatoes. It will take you to our site as well. Or you can go to yourunpodcast.com and check out our show, or any of the other great shows on the You Run Podcast Network. Sean, what else is going on?
Well, I was going to say, if you want your answer to the question of the week right on this show, you can answer our question of the week. It'll be on social media that John cares about, like you mentioned before, and you just got to find it at Dewey Pod Monster, or whatever social media network that may be. If you are interested in any of the things that we talked about on this show, especially the What You Watchin' feature portion part, we put those in the show notes. So if you click on that, you can usually go to a free version. Sometimes there are paid versions. Usually those are the Amazon versions, and those are affiliate links. We get a couple bucks here or there, buckaroos, couple finskis, whatever they call dollars, ducats, whatever, from those particular places. And if you want to check me out and what I'm watching or talking about or thinking about, you can find me at Internal-Bleeding on Blue Sky. And I'm there leaving little movie clips of weird shit that I find in my travels through the Cinemaverse.
That's right. We're Team Blue Sky. We'll be back next week with more crummy movies as March continues.
Rolls
on.
Cheers.
I don't know why I keep thinking this movie is called Midnight Run.
Oh, I thought you were going to say you thought it was called Midnight Drive.
I've thought that too, but no. The word ride is it's not sticking.
Can't do it.
I mean, Midnight Ride. See, I told you it was going to happen.